Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this Friday. And it's nice weather out here in San Diego. I hope it's nice wherever you may be joining us from. I'm very excited this week to welcome Dr. Yaroslav O. Halchenko, who is currently the research assistant professor at the Psychology and Brain Sciences Department at Dartmouth, leading the Center for Open Neuroscience. Dr. Yaroslav Halchenko holds a Ph.D. in computer science from the New Jersey Institute of Technology and received postdoctoral training at Dartmouth College. He's a neuroimaging research scientist, an official Debian developer, a member of the INCF, Neuroimaging Task Force, and a lead of, I'm going to mess up this acronym, PyMVPA, NeuroDebian, DataLad, and other projects. With the goal of contributing to our understanding of brain function, Dr. Halchenko is interested in developing new and formalizing existing analysis, methodologies, and software solutions in the domain of computational and cognitive neuroscience. Personally, I'm very excited to hear about DataLad today. And without further ado, I'd like to hand the microphone over to Dr. Halchenko. Thank you today for joining us, sir.
Thank you for the introduction, and let me switch probably to my slides where I'll appear a little bit smaller. As you have mentioned, some people might know about me and Michael Hanke, with whom I'm collaborating on many other projects he is in Germany. And we started to work together when we were working with developing machine learning-based analysis toolkit, which we call PyMVPA, which is now used widely. And then we joined our efforts also on such project as NeuroDebian, which some of you might know. If you want to know more about projects besides DataLad, which we will talk about today, or I'll be talking about today, just go to Center for Open Neuroscience.org website, where you could discover also more about people involved. And besides Michael, DataLad wouldn't be possible unless we relied on the solution which Joey has provided us. And he wrote the Annex tool which DataLad relies on. You might know about Joey has also from his work on Debian itself. He established major part of Debian distribution a while back, and also some other projects which he's working on. And this is work not only by me and Michael, but all our tireless helpers and people involved in the project, such as Benjamin, Kyle, Alex, and Jason, who used to work with us, and also our summer and mid-year interns, Benjamin and Gergana. So DataLad is quite a nice project if you want to contribute to open source and make your work visible that way. Also within the Center for Open Neuroscience efforts, we collaborate with many other projects which you might know about. And the DataLad project itself was supported by NSF and German Federal Ministry of Education and Research. So I'm really glad that they supported us and made it happen pretty much. Okay, so before starting to talk about DataLad, I want first to formulate the problem which we are trying to solve with it.
Data is second-class citizen within software platforms. What could that potentially be? One of the aspects is, if you look how people distribute data nowadays, quite often you find that even large arrays of data are distributed in turbals or zip files. Problems are multiple with these ways of distribution. If one file changes, you need to redistribute the entire turbal, which might be gigabytes in size. And that's why partially we also couldn't just adopt technologies which are proven to work for software. Let's say in Debian we distribute complete packages, but again, the problem is the same. As long as you force wrapping all the data together in some big file, it wouldn't work, it wouldn't scale. Also, another problem is absent version of data. And many people actually underappreciate it and think that it doesn't actually exist or relates to their way of work. But no, actually, this problem is quite generic. So if you look into this Ph.D. comics caricature, you'll find that these probably relates to many ways how you deal with files, data, or documents. And you could see that actually how we tend to version our data is by providing quite often the date, right? Which creates some kind of linear progression, right? So we annotate that, oh, I've worked on these in those dates, but also maybe a little bit later, and we try to annotate it with some description of what was maybe done to the data, right? So in this case, it was a test run, then we tested again, then we calibrated, and then we ran into a problem, right? So all these you save the result of your work and annotate it, so later on you could either get back to the previous state and say maybe you indeed made an error and you want to roll back, or maybe you want to just compare what have you done which broke your code or data, right? And as you could see, those messages could be quite descriptive. But the problem is that version control systems which are created for code are inadequate for data, right? So the problem is quite often that it's duplication. You have copy of the data in the version control system inside somewhere, so you couldn't use it directly, but also it's present on your hard drive, so at least you have two copies quite often. Or maybe it's duplicated and just on a single server, right? And I could give you examples where data in a version control system filled up the version control system and meanwhile filling up the hard drive. And sometimes you try to commit new file and apparently you run out of space on the server and it might ruin your version control back on the server, rendering it impossible to get to the previous version. So you don't want to have that, right? Then another problem is that there were no generic data distributions, or at least there were no before DataLad. So there is no efficient ways to install and upgrade data sets. And when you also deal with different data hosting portals, you need to learn how to navigate them, right? You need to learn how you authenticate, which page you need to go to and what to download and how to download it. So just to get to that data set. And then maybe you get an announcement that data set was fixed, and you need to repeat this over and over again, trying to remember how to deal with it. And I'm not talking even if a website became much better and slicker and changed all the ways how it actually deals with downloads from what it did before. Another aspect that data is rarely tested. So what does it mean for data to have bugs? Any derived data is a product of running a script or some kind of procedure on original data and generating new derived data. Quite prominent ones, which you could find in references later on in this presentation, is atlases. So atlases usually produced from the data running some really sophisticated script, which generates new data, the atlas. And those atlases could be buggy. So how do you test the data? The same way as software. If we could establish this efficient process where we produce some data and verify that at least data meets the assumptions which we expect. If it's populational probability in the area which must be present in the entirety of population, then all probabilities should add up to 100 or nearby to 100. If it doesn't add up, then you have a bug. It's really simple assumption, but verifying that your data doesn't break those is really important. And unified way how we deal with data and the code would help to establish those data testing procedures. Also, it's quite difficult to share neuroderived data. You've downloaded some data set from a well-known portal. How do you share it? What data could be shared? Where do you deposit it? So people later on could download maybe original data and your derived data without even worrying that, oh, they need to get this piece from the original source and your derived data from another place. So how do we link those pieces together to make it convenient? What we're trying to achieve is to make managing of the data as easy as managing code and software. Is it possible? I hope that you'll see that it is. So what DataLad is based on is on two pieces, and one of them is Git. I hope that everybody knows what Git is, but I'll give small presentation nevertheless. So Git is a version control system, and initially it was developed to manage Linux project code. If somebody doesn't know what Linux is, this is one of the most recognized and probably mostly used because it's used everywhere on the phones, on the servers, on the desktops, operating systems. It's free and open source, and it's developed in the open. And at some point, they needed new version control system which would scale for the demand of having lots of code managed there and many people working with it. So it's not a geeky project just for between a few people. It is developed by hundreds, it's used by millions. What's great about Git is that it's distributed. So content is available across all copies of the repository. If you clone the repository, you have the entire history of the project, and you could get to any point in the development. You could compare different versions. You could do exactly the same things as original developers did it on this repository. So it provides you as much flexibility to accomplish things locally without requiring any network access. And Git became a backbone for GitHub and other social coding portals. So GitHub came to fill the niche that there were no convenient online resource where people could easily share these repositories and work on them together. So Git is just a tool, and GitHub is just a web portal which provides you convenient, centralized management of the repositories and collaboration between people. But it's not a single one. There is other systems which use Git underneath, GitLab, Bitbucket. So it just creates the entire ecosystem of the tool and additional services and resources. What Git is great for is very efficient management of textual information, right? So if you manage code, text, configuration files, maybe some documentation or JSON files. So all of those are nicely managed by Git because it has really good mechanism to annotate differences and compress that efficiently. So all those distributed copies are actually not that big. But the problem or inefficiency of Git is this exactly distributed nature of it, that it stores all the copies of the documents on all the systems, right? So if I have big files, then it becomes inefficient because now you'll have two copies, right? You'll have one on your hard drive, at least two copies, one on your hard drive, and then one committed into Git. And then if you push this into GitHub, you have again a big copy of that file somewhere, and anybody who clones that repository might wait for a while to just get it, and then they'll might be a little bit upset because they wanted just one file from the repository and didn't care to download a gigabyte of data just to see. So it's inefficient for storing data. What is the other tool we rely on is, as I said, written by Joy has, it's Git Annex. So the idea was to build on top of Git to provide management for data files without committing those files directly into Git. So Git Annex allows you to add data files under Git control without committing the content of the files into Git. And while playing with Git Annex and DataLad, you might see that files get replaced with a symlink. So what Git Annex commits into Git is actually just a symlink, which points to the file which contains the data. This way you can commit really lightweight symlink and keep the data on the hard drive in a single copy, so it's not in the Git. And then what Git Annex does, it orchestrates the management of those files between different clones of the repository, or so-called other ways, special remotes. But also it provides access to those files if they are, let's say, uploaded onto some website. So you have a URL, you could associate the URL with the file. You could upload it to FTP, you could upload it to WebDev server. You could even get content through BitTorrent, or you could use Amazon S3 storage as your container for the files. And it allows for custom extensions. And say you could upload data to Dropbox, Google Drive, Box.com, and many, many other data hosting providers. And Git Annex takes care also about avoiding the limitations of those platforms. Let's say Box.com for public account, it doesn't allow you to have files larger than, I believe, 100 megabytes. Git Annex will chop it up. So on the Box.com, you'll have little pieces. You will not use them directly from Box.com, but then Git Annex will reassemble the big file when it gets it onto your hard drive. So all those conveniences, and in addition, encryption. Let's say if you want to share some sensitive data and you cannot just upload it unencrypted to the public service, all those are provided by Git Annex. Also, additional feature which we don't use in the project is Git Annex Assistant, which is Dropbox-like synchronization mechanism. You could establish synchronization between your Git Annex repositories across multiple servers and configure them really flexibly, so you have, let's say, backup of all the data files on one server, and some other server will have only files which it cares about, let's say data files. Another one might have only video files. Another one maybe just music files, who knows? So flexibility is there, and it's all up to you to configure what you want where. In our project, we don't use it yet, but we do use it locally for synchronizing different Git Annex repositories. But another problem here, so we have really great two tools, Git and Git Annex, but both of them work on a single repository level. So to work in a Git repository, you need to go into that directory and accomplish whatever you want to do, right? Kind of doesn't go along well with the notion of distribution. You don't care where you are, you just want to, on your hard drive, right? So you just want to say, oh, search, find me something, install this, and give me access to this data, right? Or give me this file, even though maybe I'm not in that Git or Git Annex repository. Also, another kind of aspect, those are just tools. So similarly, like how GitHub provided convenient portal to the tool Git, we want to accomplish something where we use these tools, which are agnostic of the domain of the data, let's say neuroimaging, to give you guys access to those terabytes of publicly shared data already, which lives out there somewhere. So we don't need to collect it. We don't need to make copy of it locally, right? It's already there. So what we want to achieve is just to provide access to that data without mirroring it on our servers or without duplicating it elsewhere. And before going into demos, I want to give you kind of more illustrative maybe demo of what is data lifecycle here of data which we provide by DataLad. Let's imagine that we have a data set which comes initially from Open Neuroscience, right? And lives somewhere in the cloud or on data hosting portal. Actually, we have two copies of the data. One of them might be in the tarball, somewhere on HTTP server, right? And another one might be extracted from the tarball somewhere on the cloud, which might have HTTP access, might have S3 access, but the point is the data is there. And then we have a data user, that's us, right? Me, you, everybody who wants to use this data. So now options are we either go download the tarball, extract it, or we learn how to use S3 and go and install some tool, browse S3 bucket, download those files. But what we are trying to establish here is actually middle layer, right? So we want to provide data distribution, which might be hosted somewhere. Maybe it's on GitHub, maybe on our server, where we'll take this data available online and we'll automatically crawl it. So here I mentioned this command crawl, which is one of the commands DataLad provides to automate monitoring of external resources. So we could get them into Git repositories. And actually you could see here that these greenish yellows, why you don't draw here, greenish yellow color. Why you don't draw here? Here we go. So this greenish yellow color represents just a content reference instead of the actual content. That's why we could host it on GitHub or anywhere, because it doesn't have the actual data. So we collect those data sets into collections, which we might share, let's say the one which we share from datasets.datalad.org, right? And underneath we use Git modules, which is built-in mechanism within Git to organize these collections of multiple repositories while keeping track of versioning information, so you could get the entire collection, let's say, of open from RRID data sets for a specific date, for a specific version, if you want to reproduce somebody else's analysis. And then we are making it possible to install arbitrary number of those data sets via a unified interface. So here we mentioned command DataLad install, which you'll see later, and hopefully those parameters installed into current data set and get all the data will be less surprising. And also we provide shortcuts, so which I'll talk about later. But the point is that you could now easily install those data sets onto your local hard drive. And if you're doing some processing, you might add results of your process. In this case, we've got new file, filtered bold file, which you could easily add into this repository, and which means we just commit it into the repository under Git Annex control. And later, we could publish this entirety of maybe collection of the data sets to multiple places. One of them might be GitHub, where we publish only the repository itself without actually data files. Again, those are just symlinks. And maybe upload the actual data to some server, which might be HTTP server, or some other server through some mechanism, right? But the point is that data goes somewhere, and the magic happens here thanks to the Git Annex, because that's the beast which keeps track of where each data file could be obtained from. So these red links point to the information of what Git Annex stores for us, that, oh, let's say this bold file is available from original portal, right? It's available from a S3 bucket. It might be coming from a tarball. So that's one of the extensions we added to Git Annex to support extraction of files from the tarball. And so it becomes really transparent to the user. And this new file, we published it there, so it might be available now through HTTP. So people who clone this repository would be able to get any file from original storage or from any derived data which we published on our website. So that's kind of the main idea behind DataLad. So altogether, DataLad allows you to manage multiple repositories organized into these super data sets, which are just a collection of Git repositories, using standard Git submodules mechanism. It supports both Git and Git Annex repositories. So if you have just regular Git repositories where you don't want to add any data, perfectly fine. And we can crawl external online data resources and update Git Annex repositories upon changes. It seems to scale quite nicely because data stays with original data providers. So we don't need to increase the storage on our server. And we could use maybe, or you could use, because anybody could use DataLad to publish their collections of the data sets on GitHub and maybe uploading data itself to portals like box.com or Dropbox. And what happens now that we have unified access to data regardless of its origin, I didn't care if data comes from OpenFMRI or CRCNS. The only difference might be that you need to authenticate. Let's say CRCNS doesn't allow download without authentication, so DataLad will ask you for credentials, which it will store locally on the hard drive, nothing shared with us. And later on, when you need to get more data, it just will use those credentials to authenticate on your behalf to CRCNS, download those tarballs, extract it for you, so you don't need to worry about that. And also we take care about serialization. So if original website distributes only tarballs, we download tarballs for you, extract them, and again, you don't need to worry how the data is actually serialized by original data provider. What we do on top is we aggregate metadata what metadata is a data about data. So let's say you have a data set which contains the data. There is also information about what this data set is about, what its name, what its authors, what might be the license if it's applicable. So any additional information about the data constitutes metadata. What we do in DataLad, we aggregate metadata which we find about original data sets and provide you a convenient interface so you could search across all of it, across all the data sets which we already integrated in DataLad. And I hope you'll see the demonstration quite appealing later on. And then DataLad, after you consumed, added, extended data sets, or just created from scratch, you could share original or derived data sets publicly, as I mentioned, or internally. You could always publish them locally via SSH. You need to collaborate with somebody, and that's what we do regularly. And meanwhile, we'll keep data. We could keep data available elsewhere, or you could even share the data set without sharing the data, which is quite keen as a demonstration of good intent when you are about to publish the paper. That's what we did with our recent submission. We published the data set, but not with the entirety of the data set, but just with first subject. So reviewers could verify that there is good quality data, that they could get access to it, right? And that the entirety of data is in principle available, and it was processed accordingly because the entire DID history is maintained and shared, but the data files are not. Okay, and the additional benefit, some of it which is work in progress, you could export the data sets. If you want to share just the data itself, you could export the data set in current version in a tarball and give it to somebody. But more exciting feature we've been working on is exporting into some metadata heavy data formats. If you are to publish in scientific data, you will be asked to fill out a big spreadsheet, which is called ISATAB, to annotate metadata for your data set. It's really tedious and an unpleasant job. But the beauty is that all that information is contained within metadata of either a data set or of Annex. So we could automatically export the majority of information for you. So you just need to fill out left out information and be done. DataLad comes with both command line and Python interfaces. So you could work with it interactively, either in command line or scripted in Bash, or working with it interactively in IPython and scripted with Python language. It gives you the same capabilities and really similar syntax. Our distribution grew up already to cover over 10 terabytes of data. We cover such data sets as Open fMRI, CRCNS, functional connectome, indie data sets, and even some data sets from Kaggle. Some Red Hole Radio podcast show, because it was a cool experiment to be able to crawl that website and collect all the data about timing of the songs. So check it out. It's available on GitHub, although data stays, as again, with original provider. What is coming? More data. So we'll cover Human Connectome project and data available from XNet servers. We want to provide extended metadata support, so we cover not only data sets level data, but also data for separate files. If you know about any other interesting data set or data provider, file a new issue or give us an email or shoot us an email. We're also working on integrating with NeuroDebian, so you could install those data sets and the position of data to OSF and some other platforms. Another interesting integration which we've done was to introduce DataLad support into HeuDiConv, which stands for Heuristical DICOM Conversion Tool, which allows you to automate conversion of your DICOM data, which you obtained from MRI scanner, into Nifty files. But we went one step further and standardized it to convert not only to DataLad datasets, but DataLad BIDS datasets. So if you don't know what BIDS is something you must know nowadays if you do neuroimaging research. It's brain imaging data structure format, which describes how you should lay out your files on a file system, so anybody who finds your data set will be immediately capable to understand your design, how many subjects you have. So it standardizes beyond Nifty. It standardizes how you work with the files. So now, with this integration in HueyConf, we can obtain DataLad datasets with bitsified neuroimaging data, so it's ready to be shared, it's ready to be processed by any bit-compatible tool, so it opens ample opportunities. And at this point, I guess we should switch and do some demos. And before I actually give any demo, I want to familiarize you with our new website at DataLad.org. On top, you could see navigation among major portions of the website. One of them is About page. It just describes the purpose of the DataLad and provides information about funding agencies and involved institutions. Next link is Get DataLad, which describes how to install DataLad. The easiest installation is if you are using NeuroDebian already. Then it's just apt-get install DataLad command, or you could find it in Package Manager and install it within seconds. Alternatively, if you are on OS X or any other operating system, Windows support is initial, but it should work in the basic set of features. You have to install Git Annex by going to Git Annex website and going to install page, choosing the operating system of your choice, and following the instructions there, how to get it. And after you installed Git Annex, you just need to install DataLad from Python package index through pip install DataLad command. Next page is features page, which is actually led to by those pretty boxes on the main page. And this page we'll go through later in greater detail. Another interesting page is Datasets, which presents you our ultimate official distribution, which points to datasets.datalad.org, which is the collection of datasets which already pre-crawled for you, and that's where we provide those datasets like for OpenFMRI, CRCNS, HDHD, and many others. Let me just briefly describe you the feature set of this basic website and mention that such websites, if you have any HTTP server available somewhere, maybe an institution provides, because you will not host the data actually here, or you don't have to. You could upload similar views of your data sets pretty much anywhere where you could host a website. And OpenFMRI, let's say we go to OpenFMRI, it lists all those data sets which we crawled from OpenFMRI. You could see also immediately mentioning of the version here, and version goes from what version OpenFMRI gave it, but also with additional indices pointing to exact commit within our Git repository, identifying that version. Another neat feature here is immediate search. So you could start typing, I don't know if you're interested in resting state. So here we go. It goes pretty fast and limits the view only to the data sets where metadata mentions this work. Let's say, let's look for HexP. There we go. Or let's look for movie. There we go. So you could quickly identify the data sets via browsing, and we'll see how we could do such actions later in the command line. And when you get to the data set of interest, or it could be at any pretty much level, you'll see on top the command which could be used to install this data set, and describing some options. Let's say -r is to install this data set with any possible sub-data set in it personally, -g to install it and also obtain all the data for it. And if you want to speed up the obtaining the data, you could use -J and specify the number of parallel downloads your server and bandwidth could allow you. Okay, let's go back to DataLad website. And another page on the website is development. So if you're interested to help and contribute data sets, provide patches, improve documentation, all of the development is made in open. We use GitHub intensively, we use Travis, we use CodeCoff, we use read the docs for documentation. So, and that will be our next point. Documentation is hosted on docs.datalad.org, and it provides not yet as thorough documentation as we wanted, but some some documentation about major features of the dataset, or let's say comparison between Git, Annex, and DataLad. But it also provides really thorough interface documentation. So as I mentioned before, we have command line and Python interfaces. Both of those interfaces generated from the same code, so they should be pretty much identical. It just depending on how you use command line and Python, it will be different. But otherwise, all the options, all the commands, they look exactly the same. And in command line reference, you could find all the documentation for all the commands, which isn't that I have some popular ones in my case, right, where I went before, and it provides documentation what those, and of course there is notes for power users, and quite elaborate documentation here about all the options which are available to the in those commands. Okay, so let's go back to features. And first of the demos, which I want to show you, will be about data discovery. As any other demo on the website, it is provided with screencast, which shows all necessary commands to carry out the presentation. It also provides you with comments describing the purpose of the actions taken. Moreover, you could obtain the full script for the demo, so you could run it as is on your hardware by clicking underneath the screencast. But for this demonstration, I'll do it interactively in a shell together with you. So let's get started. And if, as you remember, we aggregate a lot of metadata in the DataLad to provide efficient search mechanisms. In this example, we'll imagine that we are looking for a data set which mentions Raiders in this word after being associated with movie Raiders of the Lost Ark and neuroimaging. So we'll use DataLad search command where we'll just state it, right? So we'll call DataLad search Raiders neuroimaging. As with many or all commands in DataLad, they are composed by calling DataLad, then typing the command you want to implement, right? And then you could ask for help for that command, which provides you with associated help. And on my screen, it took a little bit longer just because of video recording. Usually it's a little bit faster, like times. And then you actually type the command, parameters for this command. For search, it's actually search terms, and I'll present a few other options later on. Whenever you start this command for the first time, it will ask you to install our super dataset under your home DataLad. In my case, /demo is the home directory, so it asks either we want to install that super dataset which you saw available on datasets.datalad.org in your home directory, and that's what it's doing. So it quickly installed it because it's just a small Git repository without any of those datasets directly being a part of it, but they are linked to it as submodules. So that's why it was really fast. And then it loads and caches metadata which became available in that dataset, and that takes a few seconds. Whenever that is done, you see that by default, it just returns the paths or names of the data sets as they are within the hierarchy of our super data set. And searches within the repository data set you're in. So if next time I'm just running the same command, it will ask me, instead of, oh, they want to install it, it will ask me either I want to search in this super data set which I installed in my home directory. Type yes. And it provides the same result. So to avoid such interactive questions, you could explicitly mention which data set you want to search in. And in our case, it will be, we'll just specify that data set will be this canonical DataLad data set, which is installed in your DataLad directory. When you specify it like this, it assumes location in your home directory. When you use / as the source identifier as the source for URLs to install datasets, then it will go to datasets.datalad.org. And this time we'll search not for Radar's neuroimaging, but we'll search for HAXP to be one of the authors within this dataset. So -S stands for the fields which we want to search through, and -R will report now not just the path to the dataset, but also list the fields which match the query which we ran. So in this case, it should search for datasets and report the field author. And only the datasets for HAXP was one of the authors. So here they are. For convenience, let's just switch to the directory under our home. So let me clear the screen and go to the directory. So now we don't have to specify location of the dataset explicitly, and we could just type the same query without -d, and it will provide the same results. Instead of listing all matching fields, let's say in our case it was author field, right? We could explicitly specify which fields you want to search through. Let's say you can, or to report. So in this case, I want to see what's the name of the data set and what is the author of the data set. So we saw already the author, but we didn't see the name. And you run the command to get the output with those fields included. Well, enough of searching. So let's clear the screen. And what we could do now, we found the data sets, right? It seems to be that the list of data sets which we found is good to be installed. And we could just rely on in the paradigm of Linux where you compose commands together through by using pipe command. So what this magic would do, if we didn't have this, we saw already what happens, right? So we get only the list of data sets or paths to those which are not installed yet. And so OpenRID directory is still empty. So we get the list of data sets, but then instead of manually going and doing DataLad install OpenRID 00233 or doing copy paste, we could just say that result of this command should be passed as arguments to the next command, which will be DataLad install. So DataLad install command installs those data sets, which are either specified by the path within current data set, or you could provide URLs to install command, and it will go to those websites and download them explicitly from there. So DataLad install could be used with other resources beyond our canonical DataLad distribution. So let's run this command. And as a result of it, you'll see that now it goes online and installs all those data sets or Git Annex repositories without any data yet. So only the files which are committed directly into Git will be present. And now we could explore what actually we have got here. I'll use another DataLad command. Let me clear the screen to bring it on top of the screen. So next command is ls, which just lists either data sets, or it could be used also to list S3 URLs if you're interested to see what is available in S3 bucket. And we are specifying the options at capital L for long listing and R recursively. So will go through all datasets locally in current directory. That's why there is a period. And then we'll just remove listing of datasets which are not installed because they're not of our interest here. So as you can see, all those data sets which we initially searched for and found, right? They became installed, right? So they became available on our local file system. And Alas gives us idea what kind of repository it is, Git versus Annex, which branch it is in, what was the date of the last commit, and also the sizes. What it tells here that we have out of 4 gigabytes of data referenced in this data set at the current version, we've got only 0 bytes locally installed. So we installed only those symlinks I was talking about. So now we could actually explore what have we got. Some of the files, they were committed directly into Git, so they became available on the file system as is. But data files, we could obtain now using DataLad get command. So what this command would do, let me clear the screen again. So we're saying that obtain those files, doing it in parallel, in 4 parallel processes, all the files which match these shell glob expressions, so all the data sets locally which we have for all the subjects underneath and anatomical directory, right? So we obtained already 2 open from our data sets, and now we just want to obtain those data files. Let's actually see what this one is pointing to. So it points to all those data files, and if we list it with long listing, we'll see that those are symlinks, which are actually at the moment not even present on that, pointing to the files which we don't have locally. And that's what the Penix would do for us. It would go online and fetch all those files from wherever they are available. So let me run this command now. As you can see, there is 4 processes going on. At the end, all DataLad commands, they provide you a summary of what actions did it take. And here you could see that it got all those files, right? Get OK, or it might say get failed, it failed. Get them, and then provides action summary, which we might see later in other demos. So let's now run the same command which we ran before to see how much of data we actually got. And as you can see, all those which we didn't pass for any data, they still keep 0 bytes, although all the files are available and we could browse them. Right? But those where we requested additional data files to be obtained, finally list how much data we have in the working tree of those data sets. Okay, so that would complete the demo for search and install. And now it's your turn to find some interesting for you data sets and get the data from them. Now that we went through one of the demos on our website, or we called it features, which was data discovery, you could go and visit other features described on this page. First one is for data consumers, which describes how you could generate native DataLad datasets from the website or S3 buckets using our crawler. So if you know some resource, you could create your own DataLad crawler to obtain that data into DataLad datasets and keep it up to date with periodic reruns. Data sharing demo will later show examples of how you could share the data either on GitHub, through the GitHub while depositing data to your website, how I demonstrated earlier, or just for collaboration through SSH servers. For Git and Annex users, we give a little example of unique features present in DataLad, which contrasting it with regular Git and Annex usage. This table outlines those features here, that we operate on multiple datasets at the same time. We operate across datasets seamlessly, so you don't have to switch directories to just operate with specific data files. We provide metadata support and aggregate from different metadata sources, and unified authentication interface. Also, one of the new unique features in DataLad is ability to rerun previously ran commands on the data to see how maybe things changed, or just keep nice protocol of actions you have done and record them within your Git Annex history. And the last one goes in detail in example on how to use HUDconf with your datasets and relying on our naming convention for how to name scanning sequences in the scanner. I hope that you like this presentation and you like what DataLad has to offer. So I just want to summarize what DataLad does. And what it does, it helps to manage and share available and your own data via simple command line of Python interface. We provide already access to over 10 terabytes of neuroimaging data, and we help with authentication, crawling of the websites, getting data from the archives in which it was originally distributed, publishing new or direct data. And underneath, we use regular, pure Git and Annex repository. So whatever tools you got used to use, you could still use them. And if you're an expert Git and Annex user, we will not limit your powers. You could do the same stuff what you did before with your Git and Annex repositories. So we also provide somewhat human accessible metadata interface. So in general, if you want just to search for some data sets, it's quite convenient with DataLad search. And documentation is growing. You're welcome to contribute. The project is open source. I hope that after you've seen the presentation, you will agree that managing data can be as simple as managing code and software. Thank you.
And here I am back with more beard, I guess. Is anybody still on the other end?
We are here. Thank you, Dr. Halchenko, for a wonderful presentation. I do see one question if you're ready to go into the Q&A, or if there's anything else you'd like to add onto the webinar, we can do either way, whatever you prefer.
I could probably provide a disclaimer that that video was pre-recorded, as some of you have guessed, I guess. And if you want to see it again, to torture yourself more, you just go to YouTube and search for DataLad. So that video is available there, and was part of online brain intensive in summer last year. Since then, there was lots of development done and many features improved and added. So let's say the position of files, you could now easily publish to Figshare. So you could upload from DataLad, it prepares Tarball and uploads it online onto Figshare. So it makes it easy to publish your data over there. Then there is lots of work done to improve metadata support. We are pretty much almost done with the new O10 release, where metadata search will be capable to search at the level of the files, extracting data from bits data sets, from Nifty files, individual Nifty files, from DICOMs, from PDFs, from EXIF data from the images. So there is lots of stuff going on there. We used already DataLad export feature together with NDA to bits to NDA to upload a sample data set to NDA, which was also quite smooth. So hopefully we'll work on that more so it becomes even more seamless. HUDIConf integration, that's been used at our Dartmouth Brain Imaging Center already for more than a year. So we've collected already over a few thousands of new data sets, automatically converted into bits and placed under DataLad control, so people easily manipulate them and forward data and analysis between acquisition server, then their laptops, and computing infrastructure which Dartmouth provides. So it was quite cool. So lots of work is going on. Check out Center for Open Neuroscience probably with the links to all those projects. And yeah, I guess we could go into Q&A.
Excellent. In regards to super data sets, would you say that they encounter super bugs, for lack of a better word? You touched on the fact that normal data sets encounter bugs, but when you combine them into these super data sets, what kind of difficulties do you encounter?
Well, as for super bugs, it's like then all our operating systems which we use every day, that's one big super bug, right? Because they accumulate all the bugs of underneath components, but not necessarily that the super data set itself is buggy, it's the components, right? But what makes it easy then, if those bugs were fixed in the data sets, let's say we regularly fix up bugs in metadata, right? JSON wasn't formatted correctly, some field was missing. So we just fix it up and DataLad save -S, which then saves all the updated states up in the hierarchy. So it becomes much easier to manage these collections of the Git submodules with a single command. And then we just publish those updated versions on datasets.datalad.org. But what are the difficulties? It's like with any data distribution of a kind, you need to curate things. DataLad minimizes the amount of curation needed because crawling is automated, right? So you get the new version. But then you want to verify that things work, right? So that there is nothing went wrong. And whenever you grow into the number of what we have now already, like around 400 sub-data sets at different levels, sometimes it becomes tedious. And those pauses when I did, let's say, DataLad LS, right? Now, with the new version, it will be much faster. So we refurbished that. So managing bigger collections of data sets should become only easier and smoother.
Excellent. We are just about out of time, and it looks like that was all of our questions. Is there anything else you'd like to add on to this, Dr. Halchenko?
I guess whoever wants to get in touch, please do so. Either about DataLad, we have provided all kinds of links at the bottom of the main page community. So if you want to ask just generic question, go to NeuroStars, which is a great portal to ask any neuroscience related questions. And if you found some issues with, here we go. This is the post which mentioned DataLad. Or if you found an issue which you want us to fix, then just go to GitHub. And this one also about NeuroStars. But the source code is on GitHub, so you could go there and file an issue about a bug. So thank you for your attention, who managed to survive.
Great. Thank you so much for this exciting webinar. And we will be uploading this onto YouTube very shortly. To everyone that joined us today, thank you so much for your attention. Our next webinar will be on March 16th. It'll be Tools of the Trade, From Data to Results in Neuroimaging with Dr. Ghosh. Thank you again, Dr. Halchenko, for this. It was an absolute pleasure, and I'm looking forward to putting this on YouTube in a little bit.
Thank you.